Welcome to the Run Radio podcast. My name's Trina Wilcox, and my guest today, impressive resume. I'm excited to talk to you about all your knowledge. It is Nismah Osman. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Trina. It's really nice to meet you.
So tell me a little bit about how it seems to me, I'm going to guess that music has been your heartbeat your whole life.
Yeah, that's definitely a safe guess. I discovered music when I was really young. In fact, I wrote some of my first songs when I was just 7 or 8, and they were terrible, but they were songs, you know.
Right.
And then I don't know, I just caught a bug, and being honest, I had kind of an adverse childhood, and I think that I realized that music could be that safe outlet for me, and so I just kind of clung to it with everything I had, and then one thing led to another, and here we are almost, I don't know, 20 something years later.
So as a little kid and you're writing songs, are you also hearing the music in your head at that age, or is it more just like playing with words?
No, I was hearing everything. And I actually remember, so we had this piano, this upright piano that somebody had given to us, and the only place we could fit it was in the garage. And I just remember I would go out there, and it was freezing in there. I didn't care. But I would sit down at the piano, and I would clunk out the melodies of songs I knew until I figured them out. And I would just do that. And I think what that did was it trained my ear to hear and kind of interpret music. And so it allowed me to kind of be able to put together a whole sonic picture in my brain. Whenever I was hearing a song come to me. And so the short answer to your question is yes, I was able to hear it all. But the frustrating piece was that I didn't really have the skill set to put it all together. So that was what led me down the path. I was like, all right, well, now I need to learn how to play these instruments for real and record them and all that.
And when did that start coming into play? What did you start doing?
Yeah, so I just kept self-learning on guitar and piano. And then I when I got to high school, or sorry, when I got to middle school, I started to play around with music production. So just
Mhm.
very basic stuff I had like this little cheap keyboard, and I would play with some of the pre-made beats. And I remember I actually went to my first real official recording session when I was in 7th grade. So it was again not very high quality, but it meant everything to me to be able to get
Yeah.
my ideas out into a real. Back then it was a CD. The producer, the engineer handed me a CD, and I was like, yes, I made this.
Do you still have it?
I do somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
You don't want to hear it, trust me, but
But hey,
it's
like you
special.
said, it means something. And it's
Yeah.
been an evolution for you. And it's impressive where your work has landed. We're talking
Thank you.
notable, we're talking e-news and reality shows we all watch
Yeah.
and are fans of. What was that like the first time you heard your baby, your
Yeah.
music, where the world was like hearing it too?
It was very moving. So I actually got my first placement. It's kind of an interesting story. I got my first placement, and that's what we call getting your music on a TV show, is a placement. When I was 13, and I had no idea what I was doing. What happened was I went to a singer-songwriter convention that they were holding in my town. And they had this little I'm from a town called Cape May in New Jersey, and they had this little thing called Cape May's Got Talent, like in America's Got Talent. And we just kind of one by one went up there and played our songs, and I had this song that I had written, and I was so scared. I almost didn't go up there, but my friend pushed me on stage, thankfully, and I played the song, and I messed up, and
Oh,
but I had a great day. It was a great experience. Everyone was so supportive. And then after I sat down, this publisher approached me and said, I want your song. I want to publish your song. And he he sent me up to this recording studio in North Jersey to get it recorded, and he hired this full band to play all the parts. And before I knew it, it was playing on all these TV shows and movies throughout the world. And I just remember the moment when he sent me the final master back, and I heard it, and I was crying because it was just like it was the first time that I had felt like, hey, I can do this, you know?
Yeah.
And it was just really validating and exciting.
As a 13-year-old, that is a huge deal. Did
Yeah.
you think like how am I going to make this my life? Or were you just like, hey, it's a one-off, I'm done?
No, I was full in. I was like,
You were in.
how can I get this feeling every day of my life?
Oh,
And so that's all I did from that point was just make music. And I remember saving up for to buy gear for my own little home recording studio. I worked all summer at a pizza shop, and I just did a bunch of research on, what did I need? I got my first microphone, my first recording software, and it just one thing just kept leading to another.
I like talking about just that with, you know, authors, musicians, that sometimes the job that makes you the money isn't who you are at the core. You have to
Yeah,
sometimes do those other things to get, like you said, it was all about the music. It was all about getting that.
absolutely.
So
And
go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, and that's why I'm at a place now where part of my passion is to help other artists who are trying to figure out how to move and transition from music as a hobby to music as a source of reliable income, which is why I help teach about this whole sync licensing thing. And it's really a special way to kind of escape that traditional grind of like constantly posting on social media and
Hmm.
begging people to, stream your song, because streaming doesn't really make you much money these days unless you have really big numbers. So that's kind of where my path has led me at this point.
And you mentioned licensing. That is a huge deal that I'm afraid a lot of people probably aren't well versed on. And
Oh
if you're
yeah.
not careful, you could get taken advantage of. What have you learned about that? And what can you tell us that we need to know about it?
Yeah. Well, it's what I like to say about music licensing is it's actually the film, TV, and ad business, but the commodity happens to be music. And why I say that is because you're not playing in the same on the same level as regular musicians in who are just kind of making music and releasing it. You're dealing with the big dogs, so to speak.
Hmm.
You're dealing with huge production companies with huge budgets and, monster corporations like Target and, Home Depot and these people who have huge budgets and huge expectations, right? Because they're spending
Hmm.
so much money on these ads and they're spending so much money for the music to put in the ads that they want to see a return on their investment. So, in that sense, it's a lot more serious than just, making music and putting it on Spotify. So, what I've learned is you have to be extremely organized. And that is the fastest way to get yourself blacklisted is to be disorganized and, really essentially, um, kind of be what's the word I'm looking for? Um un Not careful. There's a better word for it that's escaping me, but um because there's a lot of legality involved, in terms of the rights and the publishing rights and the royalties, and there's just so many pieces to the puzzle that if you're not, number one, educated in those pieces, and number two, willing to make sure that you're organized to the point where you've got all your ducks in a row,
Hmm.
then you're going to have a hard time finding success, which is one of the things I teach about first and foremost as we cover all of those pieces to make sure that you have that foundational level.
And I think that is important too when someone is young or maybe looking for a second career or finally feeding their passion.
Mhm.
And they're like, okay, I can sing or I can make music, but what's next? how do they find like you and what they need to be doing to stay organized?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a full-on program that I do where I bring artists in and I teach them step by step what you need to do. I host uh quarterly pitch sessions with licensing agencies and music supervisors so they actually have opportunities to pitch their music to these opportunities to get paid. So it's not just learning, it's implementing, and then it's going and getting these placements. And so I would say, I know for me, just get in touch and we can talk and see, if I'm the right person to help you. But if you're going to do it on your own, let's say, then I would just say, uh, do as much reading as you can, connect with as many different people as you can, go to networking events. If you don't want to, if you kind of want to DIY the process, which can take a long time. It took me 7 years really to master all of these pieces to the point where it's kind of on automatic for me. But if you want to take the solo route, then yeah, I would just say get as much information as you can and just keep making music, keep iterating and keep learning and improving and getting feedback, and you'll get there somehow.
Even though you sing, what made you decide to kind of go the more teach route, the more production route instead of the on-stage performer route?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, my first answer to that is I see the huge, overwhelming amount of music and musicians who are struggling to figure out how to get their footing, how to get headway. If you go on social media and you look at just the amount of artists who are just trying to, they're putting out so much content every day, which by the way takes a lot of time and effort to make, and they're not getting the views that they need or that they want. you know uh it's just really disheartening to watch, especially when I know there's a better, faster way. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, my initial passion and the driving kind of force behind this is my love for making music, but it's kind of transformed into this passion for helping others, uh, kind of take not the shortcut because it's not easy, but take the path less traveled, so to speak,
Yeah.
and kind of, separate from the crowd, so to speak, to hopefully make some headway, and find a path that's more satisfying and actually less work in the long run.
Are they doing much with this type of, production and stuff like that in schools?
So in terms of music licensing,
And not really, but that is a good point. But as far as just teaching, I know, for a lot of kids, you have band and choir, and
mhm.
that's about it. But what about, are they starting to teach the so many other facets of what is entailed in music? And do you get nervous about those programs that are being cut in schools?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So when I was in high school, which was from 2008 to 2012, that like the iPhone had just come out. So we had like the first iteration of iPads to play on GarageBand,
Yeah.
and we were really lucky, because I know that we were probably one of very few schools who had that access to that technology. And I didn't go
Mhm.
to a fancy school. I went to a public school, but we just were really lucky that we had really great support in the arts. But I hope since then that it's improved. I don't know. I do know though from teaching at Berkeley, I taught at a couple of their summer songwriting and music business camps, that these kids coming out of high school are better producers than some of the people who have been in the industry for 15, 20 years. And it's just because the access to the information, the access to the technology is there now,
Mhm.
as opposed to where it was back when I was in school. So I'm hopeful for the future of music in that regard, but I do still think that uh, there's an element of guidance that's missing, because if you don't really know what you're doing, then
Mm.
you can waste a lot of time uh kind of just playing around, so to speak. So yeah.
What does a typical day look like for you? Or is
Oh
there a
man.
such thing?
Yeah, there is no typical day. A lot of songwriting, a lot of working on my other businesses. So I have a vacation rental business, and I do a lot of other individual teaching, running my sync licensing business in general. So it's a little bit of everything.
Where do you kind of see yourself in the next, let's say, just even 1 year to 2 years?
I love that question. I see myself really um mentoring a small group of really, really serious musicians and kind of helping them cross that bridge, you know, and just focusing on the projects that I'm the most passionate about.
I think that's fantastic. You definitely have so much talent. I'm glad you're
Thank
sharing
you.
that talent and that you're tapped into that, because there are so many of us that take a while trying to figure out where our niches, where our dreams are going to
Yeah.
land. So that's fantastic. Tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so I would love to chat with you. So you can reach me at my website, nismahosman.com/call. So nismahosman.com/call. And we can just talk and see, we can become friends, or I could see, what you're up to and if I can help you in any way. And yeah, I would love to connect.
Thank you so much for sharing your time. Come back anytime.
Thank you, Trina. It was a pleasure.
Night.
Talk to you.
Thank you.